Okay, so we've built out your vault. You are ready to start building out campaigns. And so in this video, I'm going to get started on building out the wireframe, the outline of this campaign that we want to build. And let's say it's going to be a webinar funnel. And so this way you'll get to see kind of the expertise that MarketerX applies, not just in writing single assets like a Facebook ad, but what about a full campaign? What about a full funnel? How strategic can it actually be? So to start off, I'm going to go ahead and paste in a prompt. And essentially in this prompt, I'm saying, hey, I want to create a webinar funnel to get people to book a call to potentially purchase our Inner Circle Mastermind program. Again, remember, MarketerX knows what that is because it's inside of your offers database. Before we build anything, I want to strategize and brainstorm creatively with you about the angles and positioning that we should have for this offer. That would be different than what they've seen from competitors. We need to make sure that we're aligning with our avatars and thinking through what the entire funnel should look like, from an ads to landing page to webinar script to emails and nurture sequences. So with that said, go ahead and fire it off, and let's get started with what MarketerX is going to do. All right, so as you can see, that MarketerX is starting to thinking about what our request actually is. And what's cool is you can actually see the thinking of MarketerX as it's working and as it's processing. You can kind of see as it's breaking down what it wants to do. And you can start to actually understand its perspective. And I like to do this typically because I like to follow along with the agent to really start to feel like this is a collaboration. You can see that the MarketerX agent is starting to pull in different skills and knowledge files that it has behind the scenes in our proprietary MarketerX knowledge base. It's starting to load in what do we actually want to accomplish, and it's pulling out very unique and proprietary tactics and methods that we've trained into MarketerX so it can better help you build out this campaign. Here you can see that MarketerX has started to already pull in your offer details, pull in your avatar information. It's building out its own brand context from your vault. It's loaded in your offer and offer details. It's loaded in your brand voice. It's loaded in the different avatars and target audiences that it wants to use for this campaign. And you can even start to see what it wants to start thinking about when it comes to the webinar funnel. I'm thinking about this as a cold start disruptive play. The coaching and mastermind space is drowning in generic scale to 7 figures messaging. Hello, we all know that that's right. But the real white space is in the operators who already are grinding and hitting a structural ceiling, not a motivation problem. The key is identifying the one belief that, if shifted, makes everything else stick. Whether that's your revenue ceiling is infrastructure, not skill, or something even more specific about the gap between where they are and where they're stuck. You can see it's starting to have a really good expertise and advice. Already it's thinking like a strategist about how we should start positioning ourselves. What should the positioning and the angle and the mechanism of this funnel actually be? Because that's what sets it apart at scale. That's what's actually going to deliver results. It's not just going, hey, let's come up with some generic gimmicky type of headline. Let's actually think about what the real problem is. What's going to speak to this avatar and them specifically so that we get them to convert. But now you can see MarketerX is creating its own plan for itself that it's going to start going through and making sure that we're aligned and following all the right steps. So first, diagnose the competitive white space and positioning angle. It's already done that. Next, it's going to define the big domino, right? Because it's going, okay, we want to do a webinar. What are the frameworks? What are the things, the mechanisms that we need within a webinar to actually make it convert? So it knows it needs a big domino effect. It knows it needs 3 false beliefs. And what are the angle territories? So again, it's brainstorming. It's thinking about how do we make sure not just that we sell the product, but for a webinar specifically, what are the mechanics of a webinar and how do we make sure a webinar does well? And that's something that's really cool about MarketerX versus other platforms, is that when you say, hey, I just need a webinar, MarketerX isn't just thinking, hey, how do we position the offer? It's going, what does a webinar need to actually do really well? And MarketerX is trained on it and how to make a webinar actually convert. We've trained it on millions of dollars of principles and tactics that I've used throughout my career that I've seen work time and time again on how to get webinars and how to get funnels to convert. It understands those strategies and frameworks and it does them automatically for you. Here, now you can see it's already figured out the big domino, the 3 false beliefs, the angle territories. It's mapped the full funnel architecture, ads, registration, webinar, and emails. And now it's going to create a funnel strategy document. Rather than jumping right into creating ads or creating emails or webinars, it's actually building a strategy document that you in MarketerX can review, critique, refine, and then before you actually start going and writing everything, hey, let's make sure we're aligned with the angle, the positioning, the mechanism. What do we actually want, and does this work for you? And that's great because it keeps you in control. It puts you in the chief seat to go, hey, does this work for you before I go build all this stuff? Are we aligned here? And I can't tell you how many times I've been frustrated by other platforms because it just jumps right in. I'm like, wait, whoa, we didn't even agree. I didn't even want those bonuses, or I didn't even like that we are doing this aspect of it. And so it keeps you in the driver's seat, feeling in control. And again, MarketerX is just elevating your marketing output. And one thing that's really fun to watch is MarketerX, even you can see it almost negotiating with itself, right? It's reconsidering the scope here, figuring out how much depth to go into and whether 2,500 to 3,000 words is the right target, or if I should adjust based on what actually needs to be covered. Because it goes in further and says, I need to keep the brand voice consistent throughout, plain and direct, no unnecessary complexity, and write this as if I'm talking to a capable operator who won't tolerate generic internet marketing tactics. The sophistication level of the audience means the webinar format itself has to feel premium and intentional, not like a standard funnel. So the registration page needs to read like it's exclusive invitation rather than a hard sell. And the title needs to signal that this isn't another typical webinar. Again, you can watch MarketerX reasoning with itself because it's so trained and so developed on advanced marketing tactics and psychology. It doesn't just think surface level. It doesn't just go, how do we make this the most gimmicky, outlandish claim or generic campaign that people have seen already, because it's trained on the internet, which is what these other platforms are just constantly over and over again, just trained on the average answer. Because MarketerX isn't just trained on the aggregate of the internet, which is what you get when platforms like Claude or ChatGPT. MarketerX is trained on the tactics and principles that actually work, that have actually worked in the field, been proven by me and my team. And so it knows, hey, I can't just be surface level. And it's doing that because it's aware of your avatar and what's going to actually speak to them versus what is your target market just going to ignore. So it's really fun to actually go through the thinking and the transparent thinking from the MarketerX chief, because you can start to see its perspective and what it's actually working through to generate your final output. So now that it's got a perfect understanding, it knows the angles that it wants to do now, because it's wanting to build out a comprehensive strategy, because we're asking not just for a webinar, we're asking for a funnel, ads, webinar script, landing pages, email nurture sequences, all of it. And so it's deploying the subagents to go ahead and start putting this comprehensive brief together. That way, when it's building everything out, it's nice, clear, succinct, and it maintains a synergistic mechanism and angle throughout the entire campaign. Cool. So you can see MarketerX said that the strategy document is now live on the canvas. We can see it here. It says the strategic core, your primary avatar, sophistication level 4, is immune to standard mastermind marketing. The funnel has to feel diagnostic, not promotional, and the positioning has to lead with things competitors structurally cannot claim, right? It starts breaking down the big domino it wants to use for the actual webinar itself, right? The ceiling your avatar has hit is not a knowledge problem or a personal capacity problem. It's a proximity problem. Once the belief lands, everything else collapses in the favor of the inner circle. Then it breaks down the 3 false beliefs. Masterminds are expensive networking, broken by curation standard, and it pulled out some of the demo testimonials that we uploaded. Then for I'm not at that level yet, it took another testimonial from the database that we uploaded via demo testimonials. And then finally, I need tactics, not community. If you're a marketer, if you've ever studied webinar presentations or how the framework of them work, what you'll see is that this platform builds out those frameworks so well. So as we start to go down this strategic document, outlining the campaign as a whole, let's start seeing what it does. First, it's breaking down the competitive white space. So what are competitors doing? So therefore, where should it position itself so that it really stands out in a saturated market? Then the big domino, what is the big domino for this actual webinar? It breaks down in more detail about what it was saying earlier. The revenue ceiling you've hit is not a knowledge problem, a tactics problem, or a personal capacity problem. It's a proximity problem. Then the 3 false beliefs that was breaking down earlier. Then it starts outlining angle territories for ads. Then webinar concept options that we could start choosing from. Then the full funnel architecture, right? From traffic to registration, the registration page, how should that be outlined? The pre-webinar indoctrination sequence, the webinar itself. Then it even thought about the long-term nurture. And then it highlights what we should try to avoid because we don't want to sound like generic marketing or what other competitors are claiming. And then the strategic decisions that we'll need to make before we could go forward. So for this, I'm going to say on number 1, let's go option A. For 2, I'm going to say, let's go ahead and lead with the room and cohort strategy. And on 3, what I love is that it even is leaning on, hey, let's try a warm audience first. Let's test the messaging cheaply and then expand to cold audiences from there. Again, this is an advanced marketing tactic. Let's do that. I'm going to say 3, I agree. And on 4, I love that it says, let's maybe consider doing live webinars first, but I'm going to say, let's just launch automated from day 1. Okay. Now I've given MarketerX the answers. It's going to take those answers, review once again, and then it's going to start outlining the next steps that it wants to take. And notice how MarketerX says, hey, what's your reaction to the big domino in the webinar concept options? Because that decision cascades into everything else we build. And so again, I love how MarketerX is being strategic, not just going, hey, let's go build all these things that don't actually align, that don't speak together, that don't follow the same mechanism, but saying, hey, let's nail down the big domino. Let's nail down the concept of the webinar, because once we nail the webinar, the big domino, that's what everything else is going to be written and based off of. Once again, this is advanced marketing strategy codified at your fingertips within MarketerX. Now you can see MarketerX updated the strategy document. And what's really cool is that MarketerX, again, we have what's called Diff Engine, which means even before it makes changes to artifacts, anytime it makes a change, it's going to highlight that change it wants to make. It keeps you in control of everything that you create. And so here it's saying, hey, okay, for the part 5 of the webinar concept options, these are all the options that we had, right? But we've gone ahead and confirmed, locked in option A as our angle and our goal. And this is really, really helpful because again, the strategy document, in a strategic sense, when you're a marketer, you're a marketing director, a strategist, you want to make sure your strategy document is the source of truth, right? Because it's what your copywriters use, your media buyers, your creative directors, what everyone uses to make sure that they're aligned to the campaign strategy. And so MarketerX, instead of just going off and starting to create all the webinars and all the ads, it's going, hey, let's make sure the strategy document is perfect. That way it's our source of truth. So that way, hey, even the sub-agents it's going to deploy in the future, or you or other co-workers of yours or stakeholders, as you guys are working together to build out this funnel or the campaign, you have a strategy document that's correct. So when it shows it here, it shows what it wants to remove in red. It shows what it wants to add in green, right? And what's cool is you can choose to approve or reject each change as you'd like, right? Or you can even add a comment if you wanted to on what you wanted to change, or an alteration or a note you wanted to add, whatever, but you can approve or reject as you go. Like for this example, we clearly know, hey, these are the decisions we want to make. I'm going to go ahead and hit approve all. It's going to lock in those changes. And great. Now that I've approved the changes for MarketerX, I'm going to go ahead and say I approved. Let's move to next steps. So now MarketerX is going to see that we've approved and locked in that strategy document. Now it's going to outline what it wants to do next. Now MarketerX is starting to outline. Let's see what it said. Good. Here's the build sequence for the full funnel. Phase 1, the core asset webinar script. It's going to do 66 slide perfect webinar format. Then it's going to move into phase 2, which is the entry point, registration, and landing pages. Phase 3 is warm audience ads. And then phase 4 is email sequences. The webinar script is the right place to start. It's the highest leverage asset, and every other piece of the copy borrows from it. One question before I begin: do you have a confirmed title or hook of the webinar, or do you want me to develop 3 options for me to choose from? I'm going to say develop 3 options for me to choose from. Cool, you can see MarketerX outlined some options. First one, diagnostic frame, the proximity gap, why online business owners stall between 20K to 50K months, and why no tactic, hire, or offer has fixed it. Hook concept opens by naming the exact symptoms the avatar lives with, revenue plateau, working more hours for marginal gains, good months followed by regression. Cool, option 2, the room proof framework inside the room, what 40 verified 10K plus operators are doing in the next 12 months before they cross 75K months. Not bad. Anti-mastermind frame, why the last mastermind didn't work, and what 10K floor 40 member peer room actually looks like. I'm gonna say option 1 too. I think I like that one the cleanest. Let's do option 1. Here you can see MarketerX going, great, we've locked in the angle, we've locked in the concept. Now it's actually going and pulling more skills on webinar structures, deck architectures, and it's even pulling more items from the knowledge base that it thinks it actually might need to write this webinar well. Again, creating a plan for itself so it stays focused and attention oriented on making sure we get the details right. Perfect. You can see now it's loaded in. It's about to create its file for the webinar script itself. Boom, you can see that the webinar script file is created itself. There's nothing to view there yet because it's just creating that in anticipation of writing out the actual script. Now you can see it says dispatching the 66 slide script build now. What this actually means is MarketerX is, what's really cool, it's going to dispatch a bunch of sub-agents to go ahead and start writing out this webinar script. The webinar script is long, and therefore MarketerX is deciding to use sub-agents to really help the process be more efficient. But also what it allows it to do is pre-program individual sub-agents to have a specific goal or specific tactic or framework in mind for whatever it's going to assign them to write. Now, anytime you're doing a big project, you're having a lot of assets being generated at once, you will notice the platform most likely dispatch sub-agents. And this process could be a little slower than what you're used to on other platforms. But the reason is because it's not just deploying sub-agents for it to be efficient. It's also deploying sub-agents to be accurate, right? And every single time a sub-agent returns work back to the chief, the MarketerX chief agent, it's actually reviewing the work that they've provided, evaluating it according to our Hemon scoring algorithms, as well as our compliance checkers. And anytime it catches something that, hey, this is off brand, this is off tone, this is non-compliant, this doesn't meet our marketing excellence standard, it actually will send it back to the subagent to rewrite it. And it does a nice layer of copy chiefing for you. And so while it might take a little bit longer, what you'll find is the quality output is exponentially better, just because our system actually takes care of a lot of the quality and compliance and on-brand work that you would normally have to do yourself in working in platforms like Claude or ChatGPT. And that's one really cool thing about the platform, is what you see on the screen is not everything that's happening. Actually, behind the scenes, a lot of evaluations, scoring algorithms, compliance tests, and other things are actually happening on your copy or on your work, just to make sure it's of the highest quality standard before it actually ever sees your eyes. Now you can see here MarketerX is saying that it's about 82% of the way done. It's deployed essentially multiple different waves of subagents to start building out this webinar script, and it's on its last wave now. You can see right now it's currently working on section 19 of 22. So as soon as this last wave of subagents are done, all that information gets fed back into MarketerX, and he's going to be reviewing the actual webinar script itself. And you're actually going to notice at some points, if it doesn't meet the standard, it's actually going to send that copy back for revision. And you can see that MarketerX has been evaluating the content quality. Content quality came back 8.2 out of 10. So it doesn't actually need any refinement, which is amazing news. And MarketerX is going to be displaying that webinar script here shortly for our review. Again, this is another really cool part of MarketerX, is that it doesn't just write things. It's actually evaluating. It's going, hey, according to our standards of excellence and according to the best tactics, principles, frameworks that we know that are used by the best in class marketers, how is this holding up to those standards? And it's not just going, hey, here's a piece of copy that I wrote, it's going to be amazing. It's going, hey, everything that we've written, let's actually hold it to an objective standard. Let's evaluate it. Let's score it. And if it doesn't meet our standards, let's rewrite. Let's do a revision. But in this situation, it hit an 8.2 out of 10 right off the bat. And so it doesn't need those revisions. But many times you'll be working, you'll notice that, hey, MarketerX catches something and goes, ooh, this is off the mark. This is actually missing important, vital marketing principles or tactics or frameworks or approaches in order to actually achieve what we want, which is ultimately conversions. So it makes your job so much easier as a marketer just to know that things are being reviewed, that what you see has been reviewed, and it is using best practice. It is using the best tactics or frameworks or strategies being applied to your marketing. So you won't sound like all your competitors are using Claude or using ChatGPT and have no evaluations. And guess what? All of their marketing sounds the same. You probably see it on your newsfeed as you're scrolling. You're going, ooh, I've seen that angle before. Ooh, that seems gimmicky. Ooh, that sounds like Claude, right? That won't be the case when it comes to MarketerX. Now you can see MarketerX has finished its writing, and we should see that here in the artifact panel shortly. And now that it's built out the webinar script, we're going to go through it real quickly because it is 66 slides and I don't want to take up too much time. But if you've ever studied the perfect webinar or webinar formats, frameworks, tactics, you'll know when you have MarketerX do it. If you have MarketerX do it, it nails this framework, going from the false belief, the big dominoes, secret 1, secret 2, rebuilding the offer, restacking the offer, handling objections at the correct moment. It built out the full webinar script. And what it's done is given you the title, it's given you speaker notes about it, each slide, right? What should you be saying on those slides? But it nails the entire framework from A to Z, all the way even down into objection handling, self-qualification, and it's done it in less than 20 minutes. Here at the end, you can even notice how it's closing out with a sequence. It's closing out with urgency, closing out with not fake urgency, but hey, there's a cap on this, and gives the objection resolution, right? I know there are 3 things running through your head right now because they run through every operator's head at this point. Let me address them directly. And it's objection handling, putting those into your webinar script for you so you don't have to think about it. Webinar looks great. What's next? Great, so MarketerX responded. Phase 1 is done. Webinar script is now complete. Phase 2, registration landing page. Phase 3, warm audiences. Phase 4, email sequences. So phase 2 is the logical next move. I'll build it around the proximity gap, hook pulling directly from the webinar title, the 5 bullet promises stacked, agency or the founder credibility, single CTA, cool. And now it's asking what platform will we actually use? EverWebinar, Webinar Jam, something else. Let's just pretend we're using Webinar Jam. Cool. So now MarketerX knows what platform we're actually using. So now MarketerX knows, okay, we're going to start building the landing page. It's going to go find the right skills to use it, and it's going to pull anything additional from the knowledge base that it thinks it might need to write the landing page correctly, and it's going to go off and start building that for us. And here you can see that MarketerX found extra items from the knowledge base it wants to bring in. It's pulling in the landing page skills and the architectures that it knows it needs to, but then it's also re-looking back at the webinar strategy for the page brief. which is that document that we created earlier. Again, MarketerX is going back to that strategy document and saying, hey, this was our source of truth. Let me make sure that as I'm building this landing page, we're aligning it with the core strategy that we outlined in the beginning. And as you can see, MarketerX did build out the new file placeholder here in the file tree for you. So that way, whenever it's done writing, it's going to place it right there in that document. Great. Now MarketerX has built the landing page, but here's what I actually love about this platform, right? Because one of the core things that I noticed when I was using other AI platforms was that it fabricates stuff all the time. And it doesn't really have that metric of going like, what is the audience going to believe? Right? It just makes up claims and it doesn't really ask, hey, would my audience believe this claim? But with MarketerX, that's not true. It's baked into the platform. Our scoring algorithms actually call this type of stuff out and flags it to the MarketerX agent. So for example, it's saying that it had a strong score, 44.8 in passes verification. The two flags worth noting before we move on: what the Hemon algorithm caught. Credibility gap. The founder's 2 exits are claimed but unverified on the page. Again, remember, this is just a demo account. So this founder doesn't actually exist. It's just a made up profile. The founder's 2 exits are claimed but unverified on the page. No company names, no exit years, no third-party proof. For a sophistication level 4 audience, an unsubstantiated exit claim actually increases skepticism rather than reduces it. It's calling out the BS. And because this is a demo account, not a real business, of course, it's an unfounded claim. And MarketerX is calling it out, saying, hey, we have these claims, but we're not verifying it. And it's not saying that it's not true. It's just saying, hey, provide the context inside of our knowledge base so that in the future, when we use these claims, we can actually inject the proper proof that makes this believable to a target audience, right? Because we can just say one thing, but it doesn't mean it's going to actually be accepted by the audience. If it's not accepted, then it does you no good. And MarketerX calls it out. I also love how it finds even little things to look at, right? When it notices the incentive softness, the page reads watch whenever rather than secure your spot. Webinar Jam runs scheduled sessions, so there's natural scarcity we can activate. Fix, I can add a line that references the next live session date, placeholder, and a seat limit. Something like next session, date, spots. This is real mechanic, not theater. I love how it's even noticing those little things of like, how do we increase the urgency? How do we increase the perceived value, lower the perceived cost, but ensure it's acceptable by the audience? That is the proprietary algorithm MarketerX at work right in front of you. So with that said, this was an example of how I'd get started on creating a campaign. I'd always start with coming up with ideation and strategy, get that strategy document locked in first, and then start building out. In the next video, I'm going to show you the more in-the-weeds solutions, tools that are at your tool belt when you're working with MarketerX, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be your new favorite workflow. We've made editing and optimizing so much better than any other platform I could find. So with that said, I'll see you in the next video.